I'm Whitney.
I'm Mindy.
And I'm Deb.
We're three best friends who love nerdy things.
Well, some people think we're nerdy, but we think we're pretty awesome.
This is our nerdiest thing.
Hello, fellow nerds, and welcome to our nerdiest thing. Today we are continuing our conversation about Midnight Mass on Netflix, episodes 4, 5, and 6. Of course, this is spoiler friendly and spoiler heavy, so listen at your own risk. Before it does sound ominous when I say it like that. Listen with care. Listen with eyes wide open. Deb, will you please do our nerdiest cocktail?
Yes. This week's cocktail is named Bev's Compound 1080, and it's themed after Bev being a bitch. This drink pairs well with misusing scripture references, devastating character deaths, and seeing Bev get killed. And it may cause justice for Joe and Riley.
Yay.
It's quite delicious. It's got apple-infused vodka in it. What brand was that, Whitney, so people can get
Absolute.
it? Yeah, it's really, really good.
It is really good.
You put cinnamon bitters in there and a splash of club soda. So, I mean, it doesn't even have a lot of ingredients. It's really tasty.
And it's clear, just like Compound 1080. Oh, man, here we go. Whose turn is it to do the nerdy and dirty recap?
That would be you, Whitney.
Oh, great.
This is going to go great.
It sure will.
This is going to be a 15-minute recap instead of a 1-minute one.
It's almost done.
And then they go on an island and there's a vampire.
Oh, man, here we go. All right, I'm ready. 60 seconds. Here we go. Okay, number 1, Father Paul is now just a straight up vampire, cannot go into the sun, and he is hungry. Number 2, poor Joe Colley, he's in the wrong place at the wrong time. Run, Joe, run. The priest eats him. That's what I wrote. Number 3, Bev is not concerned to find Joe's body and goes into shield and protect mode. Great. Number 4, Riley is suspicious about where Joe went and does not trust Father Paul. Number 5, sweet Riley stumbles upon our angel vampire and gets turned. Number 6, Riley tells Aaron everything and sacrifices himself in the sunlight to protect everybody. Number 7, Aaron and Dr. Sarah team up to figure all of this out and try to leave the island. Number 8, Bev and Sturge have shut down the island basically to trap everyone. Number 9, Easter Mass becomes vampire Jim Jones nightmare. People are turning. Number 10, Aaron, the sheriff, Riley's mom, Dr. Sarah, and Lisa are on the run. Oh, and also Warren, Riley's little brother. And Aaron shoots Bev in the chest. Dang.
Nice.
Bev, you deserved it.
Yes.
Right? It was so, like,
Satisfying.
Yeah.
I was like, oh no, she died.
Oh no, look what happened. Before we get into all of it, Mindy, will you please do our nerdiest vocabulary?
There wasn't as big of a nerdy word as chasuble in this section, but chasuble. So I just went with some of the names. I just thought it would be like a quick, little, what do some of these names mean? And some of them are actually pretty apropos. So Riley.
They're what?
Apropos.
I don't know what that means.
Appropriate. Like they match.
Oh, I was like, apropos.
Like, are you slurring your words
You're
again?
like, what?
It's like super pro.
Oh man, this apple cocktail.
This is our nerdiest thing. I learned something new today. What's it called?
Apropos. It's actually it's French.
Apropos. This makes sense. Go.
Is this Urban Dictionary?
This is not Urban Dictionary.
Okay.
I just wanted to do a quick because there's a lot of names.
Is there going to be dicks?
There's no dicks.
Aw, man.
Unless you count that I did Beverly.
Well, yeah, then there's one.
So
You know what? We're not even going to give her she's not even good enough to be a dick.
But wait till you hear what her name means, though.
Okay, right.
So Riley, this one I think is definitely appropriate. It means courageous or valiant.
Oh,
and since he sacrifices himself in this, I thought that was very, very telling.
Poor Riley.
Aaron means peace. Again, very appropriate. And then I did John and Paul because it's the same person.
Yeah.
So this kind of applies to him in both ways. So John comes from a Hebrew word that means graced by God, which makes sense. And then Paul means small or humble.
No, I don't think that fits.
But I think he thinks it does.
Oh, yeah. Paul would say he's humble.
Well, I think he called himself Paul because he was reborn on the road to Damascus.
For sure that's what happened.
That's where he
I know that's where he got that.
The angel.
But, you know.
There's the preacher kid in you.
I was listening.
Hassan, which is the sheriff's name, means good or benefactor. Again, appropriate.
He is good.
Annie, which is Riley's mom, means grace or gift of God's favor, which she gives to Riley.
Yeah, that's
These
true.
I really feel like
Yeah.
he definitely went to the name dictionary here. Ed, which is Riley's dad, means prosperous guardian, wealth, or fortune, which is opposite because they're all like dealing with not having any prosperity anymore.
Yeah.
So I guess at one point maybe he was.
Yeah.
I don't know. Lisa means God's promise or joy, which she definitely brings.
Yeah. That's bits.
And then Beverly means dweller near the beaver stream.
I love that name kind of sucks and like doesn't have a fun, nice spiritual meaning or whatever.
Exactly. I got a great kick out of that.
I don't even think she should be affiliated with someone's beaver.
True.
She's the worst.
She really is the worst. Which brings me to my favorite moment. Which is Aaron killing Bev. That was my favorite.
Is that all of ours? Because
Was that yours too?
No, it's not mine.
Okay. Yeah, it's definitely mine.
Yeah, it was very satisfying to watch that happen.
I mean, even though, she comes back to life, so
yeah.
it's not as...
But only
as,
for like a minute.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
fine.
But I love that Aaron does that to give them time, buy them time to escape.
She's like, we've got 5 minutes.
Yep, let's do it.
Yeah. Well, and I love that too because, Bev is so horrible and pushing this whole thing forward this entire time. And then when the shit hits the fan, Bev is scared out of
Yes.
her mind and is hiding in the back so that she doesn't get killed that way, right?
Right.
I mean, it's just crazy. She's crazy.
She is.
We can talk more about it later, but well, I guess this is the time to talk about it.
Yeah, we are here to talk about it.
What was your favorite moment?
So mine is more of a twist. My favorite moment is when Riley is greeted by his ghost peacefully in his death.
Yeah, that
so
was nice.
That was
it also
nice.
happens to be my favorite scary scene from this list of episodes. Is the creator of the show is really good about pivoting quickly from a peaceful scene to a very chaotic scene.
Yes.
He does this in all of his shows. And whenever you go from Riley smiling at the girl that he's killed to Aaron screaming, I mean, it was gut-wrenching. I started crying as I was watching it, and the sudden change of perspective is just extremely jarring and terrifying, and I felt shaken up for hours after watching the scene.
Yeah.
So it became my favorite and my scariest.
Yeah.
That's so funny that you even said the word gut-wrenching because that's exactly what I wrote down for my least favorite moment, being that was so hard for me emotionally when she screams and sobs after he dies. And I wrote exactly, it just was so gut-wrenching. So we had the same sort of visceral reaction to that.
Yeah, my least favorite moments were Riley's death and Joe's death, which I'm really excited to talk about Joe's death with. We're going to have AJ Vrana on here next week, our resident vampire expert,
Yes.
because I really want to talk to her about the choice, Joe's death specifically, the choice of how gruesome and brutal it was and just like gross and visceral. And, vampire attacks typically are not like that in supernatural type shows like this, right? Like
It's usually biting the neck or whatever. Yeah.
But I mean, it was rough and it was difficult to watch, but I thought that it was obviously a very deliberate choice, right? Like to do it that way. And I'm really excited to ask her about that, about what kind of lore it might fit into and why that choice makes sense for a vampire to do that. I just thought it was an interesting choice to me.
My least favorite moment kind of piggybacks off of that. So we've talked a lot about books on this podcast that focus on religious fanaticism, and we know it's a super common theme on this show, right? So my least favorite moment is when after Joe dies, the father tries to convince Riley that murder is okay as long as one has God's grace. Because if you do, God can help clear your conscience, is what he tells him. And I mean, that's really some serial killer reasoning right there.
Yeah.
It really is. And the father even goes on to explain that even Moses, Joseph, and Paul in the Bible are all murderers, and that's okay.
Right.
So that really...
God still uses them.
Again, we talked last episode about using scripture to be like, no, it's fine. I'm not sure that it's okay that they killed people for the record.
Well, and it's very
sure.
creepy, his mood, like the way he delivers
He's like,
that.
Well, God gave me a clear conscience. I'm like, no, I think you're just slowly going insane, my
It's
love.
very nonchalant how he says it. and
Yeah.
very flippant.
It really is.
Yeah. You know, who are you trying to convince, really? Because when you look at him, the moments or hours or whatever after he lets Joe die, he seems pretty horrified by himself. That Father Paul does, you know? And then it takes a little bit of time and some convincing from Bev that it's really okay. Because I think she's the one that's
You know
like.
what she said about Joe? She said it was okay because he's a heathen.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, so he deserved to die.
Yeah, she was like, well, at least it was Joe. It wasn't like the mayor.
It wasn't
or
anyone
me.
important.
Right. It wasn't like Ed Flynn. It was Joe. Like, who cares?
And Joe was really trying to better himself.
I know.
It's really sad.
I know. It's just rough. But
one of the other things, go ahead.
No, you're fine.
I was going to say one of the other things that I was a least favorite moment for me that just really got to me was hearing Erin recount all the harsh trauma in her past. About the story of the bird's clipped wings and how when she asked when her mother's wings were clipped and she replied the day you were born.
That was
I
I put that down first as my least
Heart-wrenching.
favorite. Yeah.
Hearing her mother say that having Erin ruined her life, she had an abusive ex-husband, and then on top of all that, she loses her baby. Like,
gosh,
that woman was put through the ringer.
Yeah.
And that was very hard to listen to, all that trauma.
Well, the thing that was really, I mean, it's always sad when you lose a baby, but the thing in this instance, in the scene where she's talking about her mom saying her wings were clipped, Erin explains that her own baby set her free.
Yeah, I know.
And now it's really sad when the doctor tells her, like, it doesn't look like you've ever even been pregnant.
Yeah, that was rough too. That was in the running for one of my least favorite moments of like, you know, this mainland doctor that doesn't know her history. You know, Dr. Sarah on the island knows that she was pregnant, right? Like she heard the heartbeat, she saw the ultrasound. This other doctor didn't, and thinks that this woman is having a hysterical pregnancy.
And really discounted Sarah Gunnings.
For sure. Well, she probably doesn't think...
She thought she was a hick.
Well, she probably doesn't even think that Erin ever saw Dr. Sarah. You know what I mean? Like, I think she thinks that Erin is like completely made this up in her head and that Dr. Sarah was never a part of it.
That was hard to watch.
Yeah, that was rough. It's hard when you know you're not crazy and that you, like, this is what happened, but other people make you think that you're kind of insane. Right. You know, like Riley with Father Paul. Riley's like, this is super messed up.
Most actually, like, insane people don't think they're insane, right?
That was the thing in that whole conversation that you were just talking about with Father Paul and Riley of like, you know, well, God took the guilt from me. It's like, you know, in the Father's brain, there's no way that he could be evil or that he could be psychotic or a sociopath. Like, that's not a possibility because he is a devout priest and he believes in God and he's this really religious guy. So it has to be explained in some other way. And it's crazy.
That actually goes into my biggest revelation. And you touched on this when you did your 60-second recap. I mean, holy shit, the Father turns the island into Jonestown.
Yeah.
All out of like the name of religion, right? And he convinces everyone to poison themselves so they can be reborn. And those who don't take the poison are attacked by the new vampires and turned anyway. They literally start dragging people out of their houses and killing them instead of turning them. And even though the Father thinks he's doing good, he creates an environment of extreme violence and just a fight for survival. Like this show becomes, and I mean, is more about the human condition and the fucked up things that people think they do for the good of people. And when we talk next week, I mean, the Father is a very morally gray character and really does this for a specific reason for a specific person, which is really kind of heartbreaking.
Right.
But at this point in the show, he's like, well, yeah, everyone just, you know, poison yourselves and we'll all be enlightened. And then we'll go over to the other part of the world and enlighten those people too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I did not like the Jonestown of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially after doing that deep dive last season. It was like, oh, this is too, I don't like it. I don't like it.
This?
What was your biggest revelation, Mindy?
I mean, aside from that, because I think that's sort of the big reveal, the sort of a minor one for me was when it was revealed that, you know, the man in the hat and the coat that Riley had seen and it's been you know, circulating is actually the quote angel walking around like that, and him like revealing that reveal when he walks in to give more
he's
blood.
blocking them all at the back of the church too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Ugh.
that was that was rough. My biggest revelation is with Father. I'm going to just keep calling him Father Paul. The first time I watched the show, it struck me how good at preaching he was. Right, like he's very charismatic and he's very engaging to listen to. And then this,
which is interesting because that's not what priests are going for in a Catholic church.
Right.
The charismatic thing is definitely a Protestant ideal.
100%. Yeah. This time around, though, it still struck me that he was engaging to listen to and that everybody, really like latches on to what he's saying. But what really struck me is that the things that he's actually preaching are extremely like anti-biblical. And the opposite of what the Bible says, which I hadn't really like paid that much attention to, I guess, the first time. But in episode 5 in particular, he preaches, and it's the service that Mildred Gunning, Dr. Sarah's mom, comes back to. Mm-hmm. And he's basically preaching like God asks us to do really horrible things, but it's okay because he's going to use these things like for his glory is basically what he's preaching. And it's like, okay, the ends justify the means. That's basically what you're preaching. And that's not what the Bible says, right? Like, you're not supposed to just do whatever because you think God wants you to.
Which
that's
is
not
why
right.
Mildred is so appalled by it.
Yes. And I loved that moment of her being like, she doesn't even know what's going on and is like, this is not okay. Yeah. This is not right. And I was like, yes, see through him.
Well, she knows that it's Father Pruitt, right? And so she says, like, this is not the man I knew. And that actually, Whitney, it's interesting that you bring this up because that ended up being my favorite quote because of Mildred. He ends that sermon with, "Welcome to God's army. We're going to do great things." And it's supposed to be positive, but it sent a chill up my spine to see the shock on Mildred's mother's face because she's like, wait, you've done all these amazing things for me, and like, wait a second, something's like super wrong.
Yeah. And she's like the only one. Riley and Mildred are the only ones that are like, something's off about this. And everybody else is just like eating it up. But yeah, it really struck me, really listening to the actual words that he said. I was very much like, that is the opposite of what the Bible talks about. Like, you are completely incorrect. And of course, everything Bev says is like wrong. But it really struck me. What about favorite scary scenes in these 3 episodes?
It's not really so much scary for me, but it was for Bev. When Father Paul uses Bev as bait to tempt Riley and show him that he now craved blood. Like, the part that was scary obviously it's scary for Bev because she's sitting there waiting to be eaten. But for me, it was seeing how that was like the pivotal moment of how unhinged that Father Paul had become.
Yep.
Like, I'm going to do this because, I mean, it just seems so odd and out there that he's going to use a human as bait to prove a point.
Right. Well, and Bev's like, are you sure?
Yeah.
Is this okay to do?
She does it like with just one question. Like, she questions it once and then does it. No questions. You can tell she's scared shitless. I would have loved to have seen her pee her pants. But
in my mind, it's canon that she does in that last Easter service.
Yeah, for sure.
If peeing your pants is cool, Miles Davis. I'm sure she doesn't listen to Miles Davis. That's demon music.
No, I'm sure. Yeah, no. What was your favorite scary scene?
I touched on it earlier, but it was Aaron's reaction to Riley's death.
My favorite scary scene was that whole scene in the boat with them. The second time around watching it, obviously I know what's going to happen. But the first time I watched it, it was very tense of like, okay,
I thought he was going to kill her.
Yes. Yeah. I'm like, I don't want Riley to go full vampire, right? Like, I don't want him to be like Father Paul and embrace all of this.
Right.
What is he doing? Right. Like, I want to trust that he's going to do something good, but I'm also afraid he's going to completely attack Aaron. And
well, I love how strong her character is. She even says, so did you bring me out here to scare me or to hurt me?
Yeah. Right.
She just calls him on it because she's like, I'm fucked. I can't go.
What am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
Right. And when at that point she doesn't believe him anyway. Right. He's got this crazy story.
I like that you come to the realization that the sun's coming up right as she does.
I know.
Yeah. I the first time I watched that, I did not understand until it was happening, like what his plan was.
Yeah.
And then it was just like, oh, Riley. It reminded me a lot of the Ascended in From Blood and Ash. The people we talked about last season that they're forced into being Ascended and they're not signed up for it. They don't know what it is. And then they wake up and are just these like vampire creatures. And how, Castile tells Poppy, sometimes people just go out in the sun and die because they don't want to live like that. And I'm like, Riley is that person, right?
So
But,
can I
yeah, it was
talk a
rough.
little bit more about Riley, because he was my show MVP.
Yeah,
of this
I love
portion
Riley.
of the show. So he's seen as the most morally gray character on the island, to its inhabitants at least, not to us, the viewers.
Yeah.
But he actually ends up being the first person who's turned to understand that vampirism isn't a gift from God, like everyone thinks it is. One of my favorite parts of the entire series is the flashback into the conversation with Aaron, where they're speaking of what they think happens when someone dies, like what happens to their body. Riley mentions that research shows that the moment right before death, one essentially goes on a hallucinogenic trip, which has actually been shown to be scientifically true in real life, which I did not know. And as we watch Riley go into this moment of peace in his death, where he sees the ghost of the girl that he killed, she peacefully takes him into the afterlife, even though his conscious body is literally burning alive.
Yeah.
So according to thehill.com, a study by the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, say that 3 times fast, analyzed the brainwaves of 4 people who were taken off life support, and learned that 2 of them had brain activity that showed them bursting to life in the final moments before their death. Specifically, the type of brainwave shown actually indicates that they had conscious thought. The production of those brainwaves, called gamma waves, spiked 300% in one patient right before they died. The same researcher also conducted a study with rats to explore the impact of stroke on our sleep, and discovered that the brains of the rats displayed a sudden surge of serotonin, a brain chemical deeply enmeshed in the processes of thought and sensing prior to their death, which I thought was really kind of cool. And this researcher is the one that Riley is referencing in the show, that when he says he believes we drop DMT, which is a psychedelic compound that can actually be made by our bodies right before the end of our life, which I always thought DMTs, they were just an illegal drug, but it's actually something our body can create. And they don't really know how our body's created or why it decides to, but it's just something that happens. So on the flip side of this, other researchers have conducted studies that have led them to believe that taking the man-made version of DMT, which is, like I just said, a hallucinogenic compound, it's created by combining 2 plants, the ayahuasca vine and a shrub called chacruna. And when you combine these and take the man-made version of DMT, it feels the same as what scientists believe it feels like when you die, that hallucinogenic effect, right? So one participant in the study reported, quote, "My body just didn't seem relevant anymore, and I felt like I arrived in some consciousness soup which seemed like a different realm to the one I ordinarily inhabit, even in dreams," unquote. The participant could not fully put into her experience, couldn't put her experience into words, but did remember having an overwhelming feeling of gratitude that she had survived, and a strange sense of reassurance about dying when it was over. So the dose of DMT used in this study is really a tiny fraction of what can be called a toxic dose. So participants weren't actually on the verge of death. They just felt like they were. And they experienced a feeling known as ego death, which is like being awake and having no sense of personal identity, which is really kind of terrifying.
This sounds horrible.
Yeah, ego death can be described as a total loss of sense of self, but happens to a person while they're still conscious. And this experience has been reported by many people experiencing intense psychedelic experiences. So, okay, we just said it sounds fucking terrifying, right?
Right.
But participants in the study afterwards say they actually felt better knowing what death might feel like. And I mean, I'm just going to take their word for it.
Yeah,
because it still sounds really scary. They said they weren't as nervous about death after seeing like what the last moments leading up to it could be like. So, and I mean, I must say this out loud. Don't take DMTs, obviously. So they've actually been used in some Amazonian cultures for centuries. They think they have healing properties and they use them in some rituals, but there's a limited body of scientific evidence of the drug's therapeutic benefits, and experts strongly discourage taking DMT in an uncontrolled setting because there's been a lot of documented cases of psychosis and even death because it's messing with your serotonin levels. And so it can literally make people go insane. And so I love in this show how all these little things that they say are set in like factual things that have happened in the real world. And it makes it kind of brilliant. So, I mean, Riley's my MVP. I really like that he went peacefully, even though he died very tragically.
He's my MVP too. His death is devastating, but Riley is the reason that Aaron and the sheriff and Dr. Sarah are like trying to fight back against what's happening, right? I don't think that Dr. Sarah would have taken action if Aaron hadn't gone to her, and Aaron certainly would not have gone to her if Riley hadn't sacrificed himself, right?
Right.
But yeah, it was really that was a hard death.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm glad it happened, about halfway through the series, because I think it would have been harder for me to
get
lose
more
Riley.
attached.
Yes,
Yeah.
to lose him at the end like that. I don't know. I love
do
Riley.
find it
I love
interesting
him.
that, like, the first episode of the show, you hate this guy. Like,
Yeah.
he's killed a young girl for being...
See, I never did.
I did.
Yeah.
But, I mean, whatever they did in the writing of this, you really empathize with him very quickly on this show.
And it's like you don't even realize it. I feel
Right.
like you... Because I feel like that with Joe... I felt like that with Joe Colley, of like,
Right.
he did this horrible thing to this poor little girl. But by the end, I'm like, oh no, Joe.
But you're watching
You know?
the outside community be so horrible.
Horrible
to
to
Right.
him. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mine actually was Erin. I know Riley was sort of the impetus for everything, but she's the one that sort of puts everything into
Yeah,
motion.
she did something with it. Yeah.
She's one of the few people that just seems so normal and level-headed, and she's not clouded by judgment, even with all her past trauma and what she's going through, and she just kind of takes action. And she's like, come with me or not, but this is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
She's kind of take charge at that moment. I just think that I just love her. I relate to her just as a woman and as somebody who's, gone through some shit and come out on top.
Well, and she's also one of the very few examples of somebody who is religious and goes to St. Patrick's, but is not so
insane.
Yeah,
she doesn't become consumed with
right.
it.
She's not completely brainwashed into Bev and Father Paul's bullcrap.
It would be so easy, though, for her anger to come forward and for her to
Definitely.
have acted differently, because
Sure.
she figures out that the vampire blood essentially cured her of pregnancy,
Yeah.
because your body sees it as like a parasite, technically, right? Or
Yeah.
like a pathogen. And so she could have easily just went on a rampage, but instead chose to try to save everybody.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And be helpful. Do something
Right.
good. Yeah. Which also, Sheriff Hassan, he's my favorite secondary. He is the other example for me of just like Aaron, right? Like he's not Catholic, but he is very religious and he's very devout in his own religious beliefs, but he's not so far down the rabbit hole that he's the kind of extremist that Bev is, or that Sturge is, or that the mayor and his wife are, right? He and Aaron, I feel like, are really good examples of level-headed, but also still devout people, right?
And they this is getting forward to next episode of the show, but they die in very like sad ways. Not even just like, they just like died and they killed him. They die in essentially like sacrificing themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're okay. They know that going into it, and they're willing to do that for the greater good of everybody else.
Yeah.
And it's rough.
My favorite secondary character was the doctor,
Me
Sarah.
too.
I like her a lot.
Much what you like about Hassan is that she's level-headed. She takes a scientific approach to what's happening on the island, and it's really cool when she notices that when she exposes the test tubes the test tubes of blood to sun, that they boil and explode. And she says, like, what's the phrase she keeps using? Fucking nuts, right? She says this Dr. Ignace Semmelweis, who was a 19th century doctor, he was taken to an asylum for telling his staff to wash their hands, which, again, this guy actually did exist. He was a real person who was held as an early pioneer of antiseptic procedures. And ironically, he died 14 days after they institutionalized him for these beliefs from a gangrenous wound on his hand. Yeah. But I loved that, how she's like, at first you're like, she's telling Aaron she's crazy, right? Like, let me tell you about this guy. And then you're like, oh, wait, she's seeing it too.
She gets it.
And
Yeah.
these two women are like, okay, something's not right. And I just really like that. And she's one of those that sees this miraculous change in her mother, but knows it's not normal.
Right. Like, this should not be happening.
Right.
Like,
And
not
this-
only is she healed, but she looks 50 years younger.
But she, like, you want to feel relieved that the mother is better, but she knows that we shouldn't. And as the viewer, you learn, like, okay, there's something really wrong.
Yeah.
Why did you like her, Mindy?
Most of the same reasons, for sure. Just, I loved her big speech to Aaron about being crazy. And she's like, so, we're all kind of crazy here. But how she looks at this unbelievable story, right? What Aaron's saying and what she's seen. But she looks at it through a scientist's eyes, right? And really scientifically, she can explain most of it, maybe most, but not all of it, right? There's just that one bit of non-science in there that makes it easier for others to disregard any science and to believe that it's given from God.
Do you remember when we did the From Blood and Ash season, I talked about Renfield syndrome and all the vampire diseases? She actually brings up one of them in the show. I know. Forget which one, but I was like, oh yeah.
You're like, how do we know about that? Yeah.
Yeah. Everything is very scientific until she's at the Easter service and the creature.
Yeah, right. Well, that's
And
what I'm
then it's
saying.
like,
That's the non-science bit she was missing, right?
Right.
But that she had to see with her own eyes.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. And she was one of those that was not going and taking communion. So she was not seeing like any health benefits for herself. She was just watching it happen to her mother.
Yeah. She was really good. I loved her a lot. What about any favorite quotes? Did you guys pick anything out?
I already went. It was when we talked about God's army.
Yeah.
I had a couple. I thought it was very, I don't know, like sad on me a little bit when Erin was going through stuff from her mom, and brings out that cross stitch, and it's a passage from Lamentations that says, "Look and see if there is any sorrow like my sorrow." And she says, a lot of people cross stitch Bible verses, but my mom goes with the passage from Lamentations. It's a special kind of self-pity to identify with the destruction of Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Just very well said, and just like you can feel her bitterness, but without it being like, I don't know. It's
So overt.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just, that got to me. And then the other time was when Pruitt is telling, or Father Paul, whatever, is telling Riley that, not to feel guilt for killing someone, basically.
Yeah.
And he's asking him, how does that feel? And at first he says, disgusted. And then he says, how does that make you feel? And Riley says, angry. And Pruitt says, how does that make you feel? And he says, fucking angry.
Yeah.
I'm like, yes, definitely.
Well, but then he says jealous.
I know.
Which is just so like heartbreaking.
I know.
Like, I wish I didn't feel guilty.
I think that was his moment where he was like, okay, I've got to do something about this.
Right.
That was his
like,
awakening.
This is not okay.
Yes.
Yeah. I have 3 favorite quotes. The 2 of them made me laugh, and then one was just like, oh, buddy. So one that was not funny was Ali when he drinks the Compound 1080 and he says, I choose God. And you're just like, dude, I know that you're coming from a good place, but this is not it. Like,
and you're going to
it's
do
horrible.
that in front of your dad.
Ugh. I mean, it was so awful.
I just saw it as like
awful.
wanting to belong.
Oh, 100%.
So badly.
Yeah.
Like, it just
well, and he's
breaks
also
my
seen,
heart.
Lisa getting healed.
Yeah.
Like, of course that's going to be.
He has one person on the island telling him not to do this.
Right.
Yes, and
right.
everybody else.
thinks it's a great idea.
And this
so
person has a different religion that is
Exactly.
not performing miracles currently.
exactly right. So, I mean, of course he's going to choose to go with the miracle religion, but that was just really heart-wrenching. And then the ones that made me laugh. Well, I talked about this one earlier when Aaron's like shoots Bev and she's like, we got 5 minutes. So, like, that made me laugh. The other time, I don't think it was supposed to be funny, but gosh, it made me laugh out loud. Everybody's starting to turn into vampires and then be like, ooh, human blood, and like completely lose themselves inside the church. The mayor goes to that poor girl and he literally says, don't be suspicious. And he's about to like attack her. He says, don't be suspicious. And I'm like, dude, that is the most suspicious thing.
Right. But anyone could say.
It's like, do you want some candy out of the back of this white van?
It made me laugh so hard. Oh, that made me laugh a lot. What about any questions you guys have going into the last episode?
Do you have any?
Were there any?
Well, I think the only one I haven't asked is why are all the A's in the church signs number 4s?
You know what's funny? I did a deep dive on that.
Ooh,
Did you really?
I did.
Listeners, we didn't even plan that.
We did not. Because I had the same question. Why do they keep using 4s for the letter A on the church side? And like, I know there's a whole lot of discourse on numbers in the Bible and what they mean. And like, for instance, I know 3 obviously is important in the Bible when you have the Trinity and the 3 wise men and all that. And so I wanted to know if there was any significance to the number 4 in Christianity or Catholicism and how it might, resonate with this. And in my dealings, I did find several like posts on Reddit, like just people asking about it. And a lot of people just assume that it's just because Bev is frugal since she spent all the money on the rec center, which I thought was hilarious. But I'm
let's
like,
not forget she laundered money for the rec
for
center.
sure, for sure.
Right. What does Joe call it? Like the disciples of Bev? Or something like
something
that?
like that.
But I mean, I'm like, that can't be it. This show is too cerebral and intelligent
That's not
for
deep
that to
enough.
be it. And so I was like, there's got to be a deeper meaning. So I looked into it, and the number 4 appears over 300 times in the Bible. And it appears more in Revelation than it does in any other book of the Bible.
Damn you, Mike Flanagan. You're right.
Right. But it's most closely symbolic to the notion of creation, specifically the creation of the universe, because the first time it's mentioned in the Bible is in Genesis, referencing the 4th day of creation, which is when he created the sun, the moon, and the stars, which are 3 things that were created to give light to the world.
Which ends up killing the vampires.
Yes. Yes.
Interesting.
And then, so there, there's lots of references. We've got the 4 seasons. We've got the 4 essential elements like water, earth, air, the 4 basic chemical elements that create other substances. There's all this stuff.
I don't know any of this.
Wendy's like, wait, there's 4 seasons?
The 4 seasons was the only one I knew.
Well, and then there's the 4 corners of the earth, north, south, east, west.
Okay, I know
too.
those directions. Got it.
Never eat shredded wheat. That's all I can never remember what order they go
These,
in.
I think you'll be more attuned to. So there's, of course, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse.
Yes.
The
my
4
favorite.
Gospels of Jesus. The cross has 4 points. The 4 dreams of Joseph, in which an angel appears to him. And in the 4th dream, the angel instructs him to move to Nazareth.
Interesting.
Then in the book of Daniel, there's prophecies that 4 beasts will appear in the Armageddon. And the identity of the 4th is unknown, but is described as being the most fearful and the most destructive. It's boastful and seeking to destroy.
Like our angel.
Like our angel, right? So, and actually many of these prophecies, the number 4 is about the day of judgment and the end, which is why it also represents like physical and spiritual completeness. So I definitely feel like Bev's use of the number 4 could tie in with the notion of creation of new life, because being born again as they do when they become vampires.
Right.
And also the idea of Armageddon, since this is starting to feel very, very end times.
Right. Especially in the last episode.
It's
we'll talk
definitely
about
not,
next
it's
week.
definitely on purpose, right?
Definitely
Yeah.
on purpose. That's really cool, Mindy.
Yeah.
Thanks for looking that up.
I've never thought about
I'm
that.
glad you asked that question.
4 going on so much in the book of Revelation. That's really interesting.
You know, I think I talked about this last episode, but I was raised in a super conservative church up until like 3rd or 4th grade. I actually went to a Pentecostal church. And again, I'm not slamming any religion. It's not for me, because it's all about hell and brimstone and all of that. And the thing with Revelation, I don't know much about Revelation because they preach widely on that in church, and it's fucking terrifying, and I would have nightmares about it as a child.
Yeah, it is very.
And so I honestly don't know much about Revelation because it scares me so much. It's like some
Oh.
deep-seated trauma.
If you try to do studies on Revelation, it's very difficult to do because there's so much disagreement in the Bible scholars, because
Sure.
it's so like, are you going to take it literally? Are you going to take it metaphorically? It's, it's,
Right.
it's
And
even,
if you take it metaphorically, there's so many different ways to
oh
take
my gosh,
it. Yeah, there's so many
it's
interpretations.
a lot. It's hard to understand.
Well, and I think probably those people that take it metaphorically are like me, scared shitless.
Right.
When I take it is literally,
Yeah.
right? It's really, so yeah, when you say that it's in Revelations a lot, I honestly don't know anything about it. And I choose not to.
yeah.
Because you know what? If that happens, it's going to happen anyway. So
Not a whole lot we can do about that.
that's right.
Right.
Did y'all have any other questions?
I did. I had one deeper one, and I had one just like, I thought it was a weird observation. So the weird observation, did you guys notice that in a couple of really key plot points of the show, they left doors open? So like when Joe gets killed, the door is just like wide open to Father Paul's house. And when Joe falls and he starts attacking him and stuff, like the door is just open.
Right. That's how Riley's able to see into the rec room.
The
too.
door is open.
yeah.
The angel comes in and leaves the door open. And Riley comes in. And I'm just like, why? Why are I didn't do a deep dive on it, but I'm like, why are the doors staying open in these really pivotal scenes where you don't want anybody to walk by and see this happening? You know?
And it's really interesting because whenever they go into the church for Jonestown time, they tell them they should not open the doors.
Right. Right. Close the doors.
Okay, I'm going to get really spooky here because in my deep dive on the number 4, and I didn't mention it because it didn't kind of go, I didn't think it went with what we were talking about.
Did I make a connection?
You did. So the number 4 in pictograph form, apparently the pictograph of it means door or entry or path.
Oh.
Yeah. So,
interesting.
some connection there, maybe.
Maybe.
I'm getting all creeped out.
I know, right?
Well, I mean, because if you think about it, you leave the door open, and that's if you leave a door open, it brings discovery. It brings
right.
And so both of those moments, you've got big moments of discovery.
Yeah.
And paths for people to walk. So Bev has to decide what she's going to do in this moment, and then Riley has to decide what he's going to do.
Well, and then you have the dilapidated house we talked about last week when Bowl, the doors open. Yeah, the doors open, and poor Bowl goes in, and it's just like, do.
Well, myself is talking to me. Let's see what happens.
The other question I had was really about Bev, because I didn't really catch it until watching it the second time. But, when they realized that Riley didn't appreciate the gift of life that he was given, right? And Bev uses the fact that Riley, went out and killed himself, and, who knows who he was talking to, right? And Bev really pushes Father Paul and is like, we need to do this now. We need to do this for Easter, which I guess I didn't really realize that Father Paul, that wasn't already his plan. It seems like Bev really pushed him into it. And then I was like, I don't really understand what specifically Bev is getting out of this. She's very much the right-hand man. She's protect and deflect and shield Father Paul. I know she knows that he's Father Pruitt, but she is not just supportive and trying to protect him. She really pushes this whole thing forward.
I think she's such a narcissist that this is my own theory, that she's like, I was right. This is the kingdom of God, and we're going to create this. I'm able to manipulate this higher being who is now Father Pruitt into doing what I want. And I think
maybe that
she
is
just
what
likes
it is.
to have the power.
Exactly.
Well, because then especially at the episode 6 in the Jonestown service, she is freaked the fuck out, right? She's terrified when that creature comes in. That's the first.
She's never seen it.
That's the
right?
first time she's seen that, and she is scared, and she doesn't want to get attacked by the people who have turned into vampires. She runs away and hides. And so I'm like, this is what you have been pushing for this whole time. So what did you think you were going to be getting from this?
Do you think she just made that connection? Because maybe she thought it really was the spirit. It's not something
not
tangible,
like a physical entity.
A physical entity. And then she sees that. I mean, God, I'd be freaked the fuck out if I saw that too.
Again, it's canon that she peed her pants.
I
Definitely.
mean, she was wearing that robe.
I think at that point she shit her pants.
The robe would have been covering it up, so we don't know.
If she didn't shit her pants, she probably shit herself when she got shot.
Right? I mean, for real. But I ended up doing a little bit of a deep dive inspired by Bev, because obviously she's my least favorite character in the entire series.
She's got to be everybody.
She's everybody.
Right?
Everybody hates her. She's a bitch. She misuses scripture to manipulate other people. She looks down on anyone who doesn't fit what she thinks is the criteria of a good person or a good Christian. She's just the worst. However, I hate to admit, but the way her character is written is just genius. The whole scene where she comes in and finds Joe and doesn't ask a single question of Father Paul of what happened, right?
What the fuck, dude?
You could write, I feel like you could write a dissertation on the psychology of that and why she just jumps right in. I mean, it's just genius writing. She jumps right in to protect and fix. She doesn't say what happened, or the mayor and Sturge come in after her and they are horrified and they are like, what do you mean you want us to do this? They have the appropriate normal human response, and she just doesn't.
Yeah. Well, it's the same thing whenever he can't go into the sun. She's like, well, sure.
Right.
Makes sense.
Yeah, that's fine.
We'll just change mass to midnight.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not going to worry about that at all.
We
right?
can work with that.
Yeah, she's horrible, but she's the perfect person for Father Paul to have as his right-hand woman, right? To fix his problems and to keep this whole scheme going. And it reminded me of a cult leader, not the face of the cult, but the right-hand man that keeps the wheels turning, right? Because that's really what Bev is. That's what she does.
Watching this show, one of my big questions through this was when does religion just turn into cult, and what's the difference?
Right.
Which is probably going to piss some people off that I just said that. And I am a spiritual person, right? but I'm not real sure that we've got it right, right? As humans,
Well,
we know we
right.
don't, right?
Humans
We're
are going to mess it up
right?
no matter what.
And so, like, at what point does this church turn into a cult?
Where does it cross the line?
Right.
Yeah. St. Patrick's.
Right.
Yeah. When it becomes about Father Paul and the creature and stops being
when
about
it becomes
God.
more about the miracles he's performing instead of bringing like the word of God in.
That would be my answer.
Right.
So Bev fits this idea that I have in my head of like a cult leader's helper. So I ended up doing a deep dive on the Moonies, the Unification Church, which is a religion and also a cult.
Oh, well, you might be about to answer my question.
And specifically the leader's right hand man, his wife, Hak Jahan. So Hak Jahan was born in Korea in 1943. I tried to find out some details and specifics about her upbringing and her life in general, but I couldn't find anything really specific that wasn't from essentially like a propaganda website. So a lot of this is kind of generic, vague information. I'm not sure what's actually true or not. What we do know is that she was born in 1943. She was born in Korea. She went to an all-girls high school. She did not go to college. She speaks Korean, Japanese, and English. And she got married to Sun Moon in 1960. Sun Moon had founded already by 1960 what's known as the Unification Church. That was a few years prior in 1954. Hak Jahan's mother, I think, was a follower of Moon and a member of the Unification Church. And so that's how Hak Jahan got into his orbit. So when they got married in 1960, Hak Jahan was 17 and Sun Moon was 40. So let's just ponder that for a second.
Ew.
Age gap.
Yeah, don't like age gap romance.
Right. She is also his second wife. He had been divorced a couple of years before he married her.
That's a shocker.
I know, right? So she eventually had 14 children with her husband.
Damn.
And
14? Oh,
and
my God. That's a lot of babies.
I know, right? As of 2011, had 38 grandchildren.
Damn.
So
Is that it? Out of 14?
so good for her, right? So Hak Jahan is basically like the ultimate pastor's wife. So not only was her husband the leader of their church, he was the founder of their church. And she ended up having a very vital role in both the church itself, leadership-wise, and their actual theology. So in the Unification Church, it's kind of an offshoot of Christianity, but not really, because Sun Moon believed and taught that he was the second coming of Christ. He was the new Messiah. And through his church, he was completing this mission that was started by Jesus. And that he and his wife, Hak Jahan, were starting a new family lineage and basically like a whole new population that was free from original sin.
Which is why she had 14 kids.
I mean, I guess. So this is where Hak Jahan really comes in, right, for their theology. The church taught and still teaches that her marriage to Sun Moon was the start of what they call the true family, people who are free from sin, and that Moon and Hak Jahan were the true father and true mother of this new population, and that they fulfilled the prophecy of the marriage of the Lamb from the book of Revelation in the Christian Bible.
Again, I don't know what that means.
It's just a prophecy in the book of Revelation. There's, Jesus is the Lamb and the church is supposed to be his bride. And so like the marriage of the Lamb is supposed to be like Jesus being reunited with his people in the end times.
Okay, gotcha.
Basically. So their wedding anniversary is actually celebrated as a holy day. Isn't that nice? I wish, my anniversary could be a holy day, but
some
whatever.
people don't even have spouses that remember their
I know, right? Yeah. So their anniversary is celebrated within the church as a holy day called True Parents' Day. Some church members
Couldn't come up with a better.
I know, right?
Is that like Mom's Day Out?
Yeah. So some church members believe that Hak Jahan is the perfect woman. They refer to her as the bride of Christ, which the Bible uses that phrase to describe the Christian church as a whole, not just one person, but she's different. She's a special girly. They see her as the mother of humankind, the final chosen of God, and the perfect example of living a godly life. When she is physically present, members of the Unification Church bow to her. And if she is not present, they will bow to her picture. And they do or did the same for Sun Moon before he passed away. She is seen along with Moon as a new Messiah. Like they are the Messiah, the new Messiahs. Hak Jahan is still a big face of the Unification Church, which is considered a cult by many and referred to as the Moonies. And you can do a ton of research about why people refer to it as a cult, the brainwashing that they say happens, and it's a whole
thing. Give me a couple of examples, since that was one of my questions.
Well, the whole thing is believing that he is the new Messiah and that you need to do everything that he says.
And that's kind of what we see in all cults, right? Like you're following this leader.
The leader gives themselves a godlike status.
A charismatic, like you've been doing it wrong, follow me type of thinking.
Yep.
Okay.
Basically. Yeah. So she has spoken for charities, like on their behalf, and to charities. She has spoken with American political figures since the 90s. To date, she is listed, according to Wikipedia, she is listed as either the founder or the spokesperson of more than 10 organizations that are all connected back to the Unification Church. She was basically the heir to being the leader of the Unification Church when her husband died, because he was 23 years older than her, right? So everyone's like, yeah, he's going to die first. So she and one of her oldest children, if not the oldest, were basically like prepped and groomed to take over when he passed away, which he did in 2012. And she's still living as of today. If you do some research into all these different organizations and into Hak Jahan herself, there are a lot of ambiguities and a lot of questions and things that don't add up, like I mentioned at the beginning, because a lot of this information is coming from like her websites. So it's not super reliable. Even as recently as the Trump administration, her name and her organizations were hosting events that politicians such as Mike Pence and other politicians spoke at.
Shocker.
I know,
Wow.
right? She is the face, or maybe the founder, but at least the face of something, a think tank, like Think Tank 2022 or something. And at one of these events, Mike Pence spoke at this event and said that this organization was doing all kinds of great things, like for business and leadership, whatever. But then journalists were trying to do research on it, and they were like, we can't even find a website that gives us information about this.
Like, what is this?
Yeah.
Right. Like, what even is this thing? And it's probably the kind of thing where you ask a politician to give a speech and you just like give them some bullet point talking points, and they don't know what they're talking about.
It's
but
also
you're
a way for her to funnel money.
Exactly. Exactly. And they, claim to be a Christian organization. So conservative Christian politicians that have that as part of their platform are like, oh yeah, I'll talk about that. And they don't know what they're talking about. And it may or may not even be a real thing. So some people were criticizing the way Hak Jahan was spending money, the Unification Church's money. Some people are alleging that she was removing some of her children from leadership positions to give herself more power. Allegedly, she has started calling herself the female Jesus and the only begotten daughter of God, where the Bible refers to Jesus as the only begotten son, right? Yeah. There's a lot of fuzzy gray area with her, but she was elevated to this Messiah status, and she is continuing to elevate herself even more. And she has a lot of power within this organization and all of the offshoot organizations that the Unification Church kind of like has control over. But there are some questions about what are you actually doing? Because it looks like you're taking a lot of money and having a very lavish lifestyle for yourself. Yeah. What's going on here?
Well,
right?
That's one of my questions too. So like in the book of the Bible, right, we've already talked about how Revelations is fucking terrifying. And one of the things it talks about at length is like an Antichrist type of figure, which again, I don't know much about because I always avoided that part of the Bible. So is that what, I mean, it sounds like she is kind of this type of person. I'm not saying she is. It just sounds like she...
Well, that's one of the things that people will argue about. Like, what does that actually mean? Is there one Antichrist that we're waiting for? Or are there multiple Antichrists? And in other places...
Is it the state of the world?
I mean, kind of. But there are other spots in the New Testament where Paul specifically in his letters talks about the spirit of the Antichrist and how like the spirit of the Antichrist is already like here, and it's people who like don't proclaim Jesus as like the only Messiah.
Got it.
So with that definition, she would be, and Sun Moon would be considered somebody or people with the spirit of the Antichrist, because they're claiming themselves as the Messiahs and not Jesus.
Right. I'm interested to know, I'd love to hear from some listeners from different religious backgrounds outside of Christianity, like what their religious views are on this type of idea.
I know.
So
I would too.
Write us and let us know.
Yes, please share, because we just don't know. What strikes me about Hak Jahan is without her leadership after Sun Moon died, without her keeping it all going, the Unification Church like probably would have just fallen apart. Right. And it reminds me a lot of Bev, of I'm going to elevate myself to this position of power. And when I see that somebody needs to step in and be more forceful leader, I'll go ahead and do that for you. Right. Because I'm prepared for that. And I'm a true believer, and you can trust me, and, you know, I'm going to help save everybody. Like it was very similar.
Is cool with or helps take out anyone that's in the way.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But the Unification Church, the Moonies, like Sun Moon himself, it's all like a ginormous rabbit hole. So if you have an afternoon and you want to look some stuff up, start Googling.
You want to know a real life Bev, which is terrifying.
I know, right? There's an episode, the Netflix show I mentioned, I think it was one of my nerdiest things several weeks ago, like how to be a good cult leader or something. One of the episodes was about the Moonies and about Sun Moon. Mostly it focused more on Sun Moon than it did on his wife. But I mean, there's all kinds of stuff out there, documentaries and stuff like that. So
no, thank you.
I highly recommend it as a rabbit hole.
Like putting that together is how Bev really never trusted that Riley was going to be somebody that was on their side.
Right. He hasn't even been taking the sacrament of the Eucharist.
Yeah. And so you can see where, Father Paul is struggling. Like he wants so badly for everybody to want this.
Yeah.
And she's pushing him towards like, not everybody's going to love this, and you got to be okay with that.
Well, we're going to make them love it.
Yeah.
Or we'll just get rid of them.
Exactly.
Or we'll kill them.
Yeah. We'll just get rid of them. Yeah. So, were there any other questions that you guys had?
No.
Is there anything you're looking forward to in the last episode?
I want Bev to die for real.
Me too. That's exactly what I asked. I want to see Bev get her actual death.
Yeah.
I hope it's the worst possible death it is. I definitely feel like I feel like you did about King Ward in A Realm of Ash and Shadow. Like it needs to be
horrific,
the worst.
Yeah.
It needs to be torturous. It needs to be just really, really bad.
Yeah.
I don't like her.
I know, she's horrible. Well, and what's funny is no one else likes her. Literally no one else likes her either. There was one part when she comes in and is like upset that Riley is upset in the rec center, and she was like, "Father, I'm frustrated," and he goes, "I know." he's like so annoyed by her.
Yeah.
That made me laugh
Aren't
a lot.
you always?
I know. I appreciated that a lot. Were there any other tidbits you guys wanted to
I don't have any this week.
talk about? One thing that I looked up because it sounded really familiar to me, a song kept playing in the background, and it was in the episode where Riley and Aaron are talking about death, and it plays a few more times, but I looked it up, and it's the hymn Nearer God to Thee, which is basically like, I'm facing a horrible
end. We sing
end.
it a lot in Pentecost Church.
Yeah, like I'm facing a horrible end, but I'm one step closer to being in your presence, right? And that is allegedly the last song that was played by the band on the Titanic as it was sinking.
Oh.
Which I thought was an interesting...
It's not really I guess if that's your line of thinking, like, oh, well, I'm going to die and like be closer to God. But I think the point of it in this show is that like, this is not about to get better.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Nope, for sure. I did have a couple of book recommendations that I thought of watching the show so far.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good.
Please go ahead and I'll give you mine.
So one of the books that I'm recommending is The Girls by Emma Cline. It's real like cult vibes, which, St. Patrick's is basically a giant cult at this point. The King of Battle and Blood, I thought of because Sturge comes into the rec center after Riley has been turned, and he's basically like offering himself up as a vassal. Yeah. Like he's cutting his own blood and giving it to them in like a chalice so that they will be satiated but not like attacking people. So the King of Battle and Blood, the vampires in those books use vassals as well that are, volunteering to be fed. And then from Blood and Ash, it made me think of, just because what we talked about before about Riley, like he's basically one of the ascended, right? Like he's turned against his will and he takes it into his own hands to not have to live that life, right? And it just made me think of From Blood and Ash. So those were mine.
So one of mine is a book that actually just came out that I was lucky enough to read an arc for, and it was called Together We Rot. And it's about this boy that finds out his family is about to sacrifice him for religious reasons. Like he has this seed inside of him that essentially has to get planted into the next generation so that the land can thrive.
Oh my.
So this whole thing about like, we'll do anything, right? To make sure that we are prosperous, right? Which is essentially what Bev is doing here too. And then my other one would be Queen of the Damned, which is actually the second book in the Vampire Chronicles by Anne Rice. And the reason I recommend this book is because Queen Akasha in this series has been asleep for hundreds of years, and Lestat awakens her with his music, but she does not like the state of the world and goes into this godlike frenzy. And what's very interesting, and if you've watched this movie, please don't ever watch it again and just read the book. Because what's really interesting about the book is that she's trying to rid the world of sin and starts killing off all of the men, with the exception of those for breeding purposes.
Ooh.
Nice.
Yeah, she's an evil little queen.
Wow.
So yeah, I would recommend both of those.
Yeah, those are good.
Yeah, Together We Rot. It's brand new. It's
I've
really
been
great.
wanting to read that ever since you posted your review.
Yeah, it's got a very Stranger Things vibe too, with like it's teenagers that are trying to like help save their friend, and there's like 5 of them, and so it's really some good, like, reminds me of late 80s horror, which I really, really like.
Yeah, that sounds good. Add it to the list.
And it's weird AF in a lot of places, but in a really good way.
Right.
Like, creepy weird.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I really am going to add it to my list. The never-ending TBR.
I know, after all the other things I've told you to read.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think that's it.
Yeah.
Except our nerdiest things.
Don't forget that.
Who wants to go first for the nerdiest thing of the week?
I'll go first because mine's actually TBR related. For a long time, you two have been telling me to read the Plated Prisoner series, and I've kind of put it off because there's several books in it, and it just felt very daunting to me. But spoiler alert, we are actually going to be talking about the 5th book, which comes out on December 7th. It's called Gold. It's by Raven Kennedy, and the whole series is by Raven Kennedy, and we're super excited to talk about it. But I obviously had to get prepared since we're going to be talking about it on the podcast. So I started the series, and it starts off pretty slow. It's a pretty slow burn, and you all kept telling me just keep reading, like we always tell each other. And then, of course, I got like completely involved in it and just devoured it last week.
It's good, right?
So good. And I actually just finished it last night, and now I'm like dying for the next one.
Right.
So I'm kind of glad I waited, because now I don't have to wait as long as you all did.
I know, right?
But man, I'm like all in on this story. It is so cool. It's very cool. Everyone should read it. It's a Midas retelling with a twist.
Yeah, it's really
look
good.
out for my review. I'm sure it'll be posted eventually. That did not sound right. I'm sure
Whenever Deb posts it, for the record, when there's 3 avid readers on a podcast,
it's hard
and
to
we
post
all
all.
review.
Yeah.
So some of them get pushed back. There's some stuff I read in like July that we've not posted.
We have like 67 reviews.
Yeah, I
in the
mean,
queue.
guys, we're way behind on posting reviews.
That's
so
okay. That's
it'll
just
get
because we love
posted.
books.
It'll
Yeah.
get posted. It's great. It's a good problem to have for sure. So yeah, I'm really excited about getting to that and diving more into that realm with both of you.
And I want to point out, you had said about the beginning, the first book is very, very important, but
Yes.
it has a lot of triggers in it. I would highly recommend reading those first. There's a lot of sexual assault in the book. And then the end of book 1 takes a very supernatural twist that's unexpected, and then the rest of the series is a much different pace. But
Yes.
I do think it's needed in that
It's
first
definitely
book, but it's a tough read.
necessary.
It's
You
the
have
necessary world building.
You have to have that foundation. But honestly, like if I didn't have somebody telling me you need to keep reading, I might have not finished it, to be honest with
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
definitely just keep reading. It's necessary, and I promise you it's worth the
It pays off. Yeah.
Yes.
It's so good.
Well, speaking of books, my nerdiest thing is also book related. So earlier this week, I went to Louder Than Life, which is a music festival here in Kentucky, to see Weezer and the Foo Fighters. But when you go to those shows, there's like 20 different stages and all kinds of bands, and you got to kind of wait in between. And so I had a book in my bag and took a blanket and laid in the grass and read. Everyone else is like drinking and smoking pot, and I'm laying in the grass reading a book. It was really, really fun. And it was nice, restful respite in between being in those big crowds and stuff. So yeah, this is a great show.
Fun fact, I also went to Louder Than Life because I could hear it in my house.
You could hear that all the way at your house.
That's crazy.
Wow.
I mean, I
That's loud.
could, it wasn't the same experience,
Well,
but I
but
definitely
still.
could hear the music. I could hear it.
That's
Cool.
crazy.
What was yours, Whitney?
Well, mine's music related. So Blink 182 is now like together again as a band. And I really love Blink 182.
It really is all the small things, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I wasn't allowed to listen to them when I was in high school. My sister one year got me a Blink 182 CD like for Christmas, and my parents like threw it
Was
away.
it
They
Enema of the
confiscated it?
State?
I don't remember which one it was.
Was it the one with the nurse on the front?
No, it wasn't that one.
Okay.
It definitely was not that one. It was one of the other ones. But my sister knew that I really wanted it, and my parents had been very clear that I was not allowed to have it, and she bought it for me for Christmas anyway. And I remember her being like so smug when I opened it, like to my parents, like, see, you know, I'm rebelling.
To what we want
right.
when we
well,
want.
and then my parents like threw it away. But anyway, I love Blink-182, and they've released one of their new like singles, which I definitely listened to multiple times and cried last night. It's very like, we're getting older and like we've been through some stuff, and it took like tragedy for us to come back together, and it was really impactful in a way that I didn't expect it to be. And then I was like, wow, I'm a dork, but it was really,
The
it's
moral
really cool.
of that story is, parents, if you restrict your kids and throw away their stuff, it will become one of their favorite bands.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, my husband wasn't, he was also a preacher's kid, and he wasn't allowed to listen to the radio growing up, and then he went into
Radio.
the industry for his job.
His whole career now is
Yep.
rebellion.
Yeah, exactly. You preacher's kids are crazy.
I know, we're so crazy. Well, that's it for this episode. Next week, we are finishing out our discussion of Midnight Mass, talking about the final episode, episode 7, with our vampire expert, AJ Vrana will be with us. Fantastic.
Cannot wait.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Like what you heard in this episode? Follow Our Nerdiest Thing on Instagram at instagram.com/Our Nerdiest Thing, or Facebook at facebook.com/Our Nerdiest Thing. We love hearing from fellow nerds. Email us at ournerdiestthing@gmail.com.